Hey everyone, welcome back to Gaming It Old School. Today we're going to review the original Silent Hill for PS1 and try to answer the question that I posed to myself when I first started my playthrough. Does the game hold up in 2022? And if you haven't watched my playthrough, I'll put the link in the description so you can go check it out. So like always, please like and subscribe to my channel, I'd greatly appreciate it, and let's get started. Playing Silent Hill 23 years after its release was truly a fun and nostalgic experience, especially considering the last time I played was right after its release, so it's been a little while. When I first got into the gameplay, the lower quality of the graphics really hit me. I mean, after not playing something like that for so long and, getting more used to playing some of the modern video games in this genre, it's very, very different. It made me laugh a little bit, but it brought back so many memories of gaming in my childhood. However, the game is so well written and engrossing, it doesn't even take very long for the graphics to get used to the graphics and just get lost in the gameplay. Funny enough, when I went back to play again a day or two after I started, there was kind of a second wave of adjustment to get used to the graphics. I actually just thought there was, something wrong and tried resetting the game thinking, surely the graphics weren't this bad last time I played. Looked at my video from previous play, and sure enough, it was. It was a funny realization that I just, as I got into it, I stopped noticing. One thing I did want to point out that I thought about several times at random points during the gameplay is that opening theatrical scene. It kind of goes through a bunch of different clips of things that happen throughout the game. It doesn't give you very much pretext for why they're showing it to you. It's pretty interesting because I was completely confused as to why they were showing it to me. I was like, is this stuff I'm supposed to be paying attention to so I know it when I start playing? Are they going to catch me up on it later? I had no idea what the heck was going on. They really didn't explain the significance of the scene. But as I played further on, it became obvious and that I just hadn't made it to those portions of the game yet. So the beginning was mostly, a waste of time, to be completely honest. It served no purpose other than to confuse me, and it looked pretty cool. So, I mean, at that time, it probably was, really good theatrical scene, so it was just something they were just getting used to, whereas as now, it's almost like you're watching a movie whenever you start a new video game, so... so going back, I guess it's a little harder to watch and understand those things. But, so all the blended cutscenes in the opening scene eventually made perfect sense. Except for one glaring exception. The car crash. Pretty much the most important part of the opening sequence. The part of the cutscene that leads right into the gameplay. It shows Harry driving on a dark, empty highway with his daughter Cheryl, where he sees something in the road and swerves to avoid it. One moment he's on a highway with like a guardrail and a steep drop off on one side and a cliff face to his left. And after the crash, he's all of a sudden in the middle of a small town with no apparent highway access anywhere, where he was clearly not driving in the cutscene. I don't know if it was supposed to be part of the WTF factor or if it was just... if it just happened due to the developer's uncertainty on how to make the initial theatrical scene blend with the actual gameplay. But it just seemed a little lazy, honestly. So kind of I got to deduct some points for that because I don't think that they did a very good job, going from the opening scene into the gameplay seamlessly. And I think they could have done a much better job at that. But yeah, Silent Hill did a lot of things really well for what I believe is a game that was kind of firmly stuck between, the old generations, the old style of gameplay and the next generations, we're kind of more used to now. It was games moving into the 3D realm like that. We're just kind of establishing their footing. So there was still a lot of trial and error. So I try to give them a break for stuff like that. You got to really look at it with the context of what was available at that time, what were the frames of references and things like that. But the atmosphere in the game was really cool. It was really tough trying to figure out which way the enemies were coming at me when I was, when it was pitch black outside. But even during the day, the visibility was low due to, the environment being really foggy. That factor made the combat kind of tricky at times. And I kind of say that like a positive thing because, it was actually pretty fun. It kind of added to the creepy factor. You can't see a zombie, or, a bad guy coming from a mile away and just work to avoid it. Sometimes they just kind of feel like they're right up on you. I think that's probably a big reason they use that radio to kind of warn you of things around you. But yeah, the game just it had some legitimately cool twists and turns that I didn't see coming, and I was actually kind of surprised, even going back in time, how much of that stuff, it really did hold up, in terms of being creepy and just in terms of like, wow, I didn't expect that. I won't give them away. I want to say more. I won't give them away just because if you haven't played it or you haven't done my playthrough yet, but I'll just kind of leave it at that. There are some really cool twists in the game. It's got a really well-written storyline. It's really good. So if you haven't watched my playthrough, again, you can find it in the comments. I'd recommend checking it out if you don't, play in your own playthrough. So that way you can kind of go see what I was talking about. It was a lot of fun. By the way, if you haven't already, please take this chance to like and subscribe below. Anyway, one thing I particularly liked about Silent Hill were the puzzles. It was nice to touch, it was a nice touch to add things that, make you think on your feet, without making them too difficult. Like, the puzzles weren't incredibly difficult in Silent Hill, but it was really nice to kind of break it up from the, just like, running around aimlessly, fighting. And, it was a nice touch. I'm not sure the game would have been quite as fun without it because, it just adds a whole nother level. But I didn't really get stuck on any of them for too long. So, that makes it a little bit easier to say, when you aren't really stuck on something, because that can be pretty frustrating. I especially like the piano puzzle earlier on in the game at Midwich Elementary. When you get in the elementary school, one of the important things that you have to do before you can proceed is you have to solve that piano puzzle. It's something I always kind of really tied to my childhood. It's one of the big things I remember about the video game is when I was a kid, I had so much trouble trying to solve that puzzle. Like I said, I was like 10 or 11 when that game came out, and it was pretty tough for me that time, and it really just stuck out in my head. But yeah, some of the puzzles were trickier than others. I'm not gonna lie, I had a kind of a mild moment of panic at that one horoscope puzzle that I was kind of getting stuck on. I walked around the room several times, and I really had no idea what the heck I was gonna do, because all I was thinking the entire time was, I don't know anything about horoscopes, so I'm just gonna fail this. So I kind of ended up figuring out a method that I really didn't think was going to work. It was kind of Hail Mary, and I honestly kind of felt a little stupid even saying it out loud, but I was like, I felt like I got to do something here. So, and it worked. Again, I'm not going to give it away, but if you watch it, you'll kind of see what I was talking about, and just know in that moment I was like, oh man, I hope my viewers don't have to sit here and watch me for an hour trying to figure out this puzzle. But yeah, for all the awesome aspects of the game, there were some negatives. The voice acting was pretty damn bad.
Yeah.
At times it was so bad that it seemed intentional, like someone exaggeratedly mocking bad acting skills.
Gibberish like that.
I really couldn't believe that it made its way into like of anything, a video game or otherwise. And to really compound that, the music choices in some of the cutscenes were just downright terrible.
I don't know what happened.
Maybe it was more fitting at the time, like we talked about. You got to try to look at that lens of, when it comes out or when it came out. But it seems pretty bad. Like the first time you meet Sybil, the music sets the tone as much more chill than it really should be. It's like, come on, man. He should be like, dude, I'm trying to find my daughter. My daughter is lost. Peace out. I'm not going to sit here in this calm music and, have this back and forth with you. I'm the hell out. It almost seemed romantic at times, which was just really awkward seeming. I think it was just kind of a bad touch. And another thing, I really want to bash the clunky gameplay, and there were certain times that I was like internally cursing and screaming at Harry to stop sucking, but at the same time, the backstory provides that Harry, the main character, is not a highly skilled, combat-ready person. He's that, that everyman that's forced into a living nightmare where he has to defend himself while he's, attempting to find his daughter. And you shouldn't really expect him to jump out of his wrecked automobile, likely concussed and feeling pretty awful, ready to strap on an assault weapon and employ some secret deadly combat techniques. It kind of makes sense where they went with it. maybe it makes more sense than I was willing to admit in the moment. That he would, that I had to straight up and turn and run from opponents and frequently fight on the defensive, rather than being able to sneak in with a cloth soaked with ether, ready to snap an opponent's neck completely undetected. Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, dude was probably pretty thoroughly terrified. Like I said, he was just like the everyman. He's not like some of these other video games where these are highly trained individuals, like, going into, things they've trained for and things they've had experience with. I mean, this is just completely out of left field for the guy. However, I will say that there is no reason I should not be able to hit opponents while they're while they're on the ground trying to get back up. That was incredibly infuriating, especially when I was early on in the game trying to get used to the melee weapons. They'd be on the ground like, oh, please hit them, just kill them. And you'd have to sit there and wait for them to get up and they'd be able to attack you again. It's like, oh, it was right there. I mean, it's like, what the heck is that? Is it Harry's sense of fighting fair? His code of ethics wouldn't allow him to stoop so low, either literally or figuratively. Maybe he just had a bad back. I mean, who knows? In any case, I shouldn't have to waste ammo on giant roaches when he probably could have just stomped them to death or hopped over them. But Harry, for some reason, is entirely incapable of jumping, which is another kind of knock on the game, because it was incredibly frustrating at times. Like, there were certain times where you'd be completely blocked out of an area because there's like a 16-inch tall box on the floor. Like, really? Come on, man. I mean, there was a time, at one point in the game where I thought I had to get around this one building, and there seemed like there was no way to get around to it. And it turns out, ultimately I was on the wrong path, and I didn't have to get behind it. But, just looking because there was stuff in the way, and I was like, I can see the back door from the inside. I just can't get to it because there's little things on the floor that I could easily step over. So, yeah. But we'll talk about the elephant in the room. There has always been a lot of comparison between Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and rightfully so. They're both from the same genre, came out for the same consoles within a few years of each other. Silent Hill clearly being the later game to be released. So some video game critics have even gone as far to say that Silent Hill is a shameless clone of Resident Evil. I mean, they still tried to say in such a way that they were giving Silent Hill its due credit, but I think that's a really unfair take, because I mean, is every game that comes out like its own brand new genre? Is every game just some trailblazing masterpiece that's gone in a completely different direction than other games? I mean, was there never a zombie, in a game before Resident Evil? I mean, was that a knockoff of Super Ghouls and Ghosts? So I think that's really unfair, just because, they came out a few years apart, and they had maybe a few similar elements, but the games are just way too dissimilar to lend credence to that theory. I think it's a really lazy take, and Silent Hill is really successful on its own. I mean, they both have kind of an element of psychological horror, and they both do kind of rely on puzzles to continue through the storyline, but that's really about where the comparison ends, and they're not even, the same in even those ways. I mean, Silent Hill, sets a scene just much differently than Resident Evil does, and, the puzzles just kind of have a different meaning, and it feels different. Resident Evil is predicated on highly trained combat specialists to fight a zombie epidemic, and it's scary, it's a bit more fast-paced, where Silent Hill, I mean, like we touched on before, it's a guy that's just thrown into a situation, a regular guy trying to save his daughter, in this living nightmare. It relies much more heavily on being creepy and much more on that psychological element. I mean, according to one of Silent Hill's, prominent artists, the game was a lower budget and was intended to be more of a masterpiece than something that was going to like kill it in video game sales. They wanted an engrossing storyline, which I feel is evident in the execution of the game. In fact, I would say that another aspect of it, that sets it apart from Resident Evil is, Resident Evil had its storylines. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't as intricate as Silent Hill. Again, don't get me wrong, Resident Evil is one of my favorite games of all time, especially the first one. So, I'm definitely not a Silent Hill fanboy, just, out here saying Resident Evil sucks, Silent Hill's great. I see there's room for comparison, but, they're different games. I love Silent Hill, love Resident Evil. And as I mentioned multiple times through the playthrough, and I've already mentioned in this review, the game really does hold up after all this time. I mean, it's a great horror game. It's a great game. It's got really great elements that, even now that we're moving into these, hyper realistic video games, and even, we're actually getting, virtual reality, which was, unheard of in 1999, obviously. I mean, it's still, I think it's going to be a timeless game. I really do. I mean, it's just, if you can just, especially for people, my age that are, played the game, it's going to be easier to play because, you've played with those kind of graphics, but it's just a really good game. I think it just really does hold up. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I was going to rate this game, and it was really hard. After much thought, I decided I'm going to give it 4.25 out of 5 stars. I know it's a strange rating, but like I said, I really struggled trying to give this game a rating because I wanted to be objective. But I love the game. I wanted to make sure the nostalgia wasn't just going to be, the biggest weighted factor in my in my review. I didn't have the heart to give it 4, but I didn't really want to give it 4.5. I really struggled with it. I really want to give it 5 stars, but I know that's not realistic. It's a great story. I love the progression of the storyline. Had to dock some points for the poor voice acting, the music choices, the aforementioned gameplay issues, like not being able to strike opponents on the ground, because they did make tangible issues, that lessened the feeling of immersion that I got from, the combat, and it kind of took me out of it a little bit, and I think it was kind of lacking a little bit. So overall, this is a really great game. I would recommend anyone to play it, especially just anyone who's a fan of horror in general. I mean, I think it's a staple. I mean, it really is. It's always going to be one of those games you think of, at least like, again, in my age group, if you think, of a horror video game, Silent Hill is going to pop in your head just right along with Resident Evil. It's one of the first games I think of when I think of the classic PS1. I mean, in fact, it's a great game. There's honestly a lot more I want to say, but again, I've said it a few times, trying to avoid spoilers. I know that may sound silly for such an old game, but hey, a playthrough would be new to a lot of people, and I highly recommend it. And I don't want to just go throwing stuff out there just because it's older. If you're watching this, you've probably either already played it or you're interested in playing it. And if you're in the latter group, I want to make sure that I'm not giving stuff away. I want to kind of keep some of that excitement for you because, again, it's a really good game. It has some great twists, cool puzzles. It's got some pretty scary monsters, but you just have to get used to the gameplay is a little clunky. But again, you got to almost play it like you're, not a superhero. you're a man, running around. So, I mean, and as far as the not wanting to give away spoilers, that's especially because one of the biggest question marks I have pertains to something that happens at the very end. So, I mean, it's kind of tough because I want to bring it up, but I'm going to leave it right there in terms of, I'm not, no spoilers. If you're curious, please go check out my playthrough. It's linked in the description. I hope you enjoyed this review of the original Silent Hill for PlayStation. In the comments, give me your thoughts on the game, my playthrough, the review. Did I miss anything? Is there something else I should have, given more consideration to give it a higher or lower score? Is there something else I should have talked about? Also, let me know what games you want me to play. I'd love to get some comments. Just let me know what are you looking to see. We're all, we all love this retro gaming thing. That's why we're here. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Please like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you next time.